Besides Vader, Inquisitor Jerrick is undeniably the most dangerous subordinate that Palpatine had, and he puts any canon Inquisitor to absolute shame. Greetings again, students of the Force, and welcome back to the Archives. Within the Empire, Palpatine had already begun creating his rule of one philosophy. That philosophy was that one would be all-powerful, the Sith Master, and many Force-powered underlings would serve them. Each would only share a fraction of his power to do his bidding. He continued the rule of two with Vader mostly for ceremony, but he kept Vader around because of how useful and powerful he had become. But directly beneath these two Lords of the Sith, the Empire had several different organizations of dark side adepts. Of these, there were the Emperor's Hand, the Shadow Guard, and the Inquisitorius, among others. The Inquisitors are something that remain much more mysterious in Legends continuity, but they were the highest ranking organization in the entire Empire, ranked even above the Emperor's Hands. Each one reported directly to Vader and the Emperor for their assignments. But a part of the Legends or the EU Inquisitors, there was one who stood out from among the rest. One who was so wise in the dark side, so powerful in the Force, that he could have risen to eclipse the power of Darth Sidious, or at least he thought so. But if we take this rumor at face value, he would have been the next Emperor Valkorian at his full potential. Well, my friends, in today's holocron, we are going to be discussing the High Inquisitor Jerrick, one of Palpatine's underlings that really had the potential of being right alongside the Lords of the Sith. Jerrick began his life as many Inquisitors did, as a Jedi in the Clone Wars. He was one of the Miraluka species, beings who were identical to humans but with the exception they were born without eyes, rendering them physically blind. Instead, their species was innately Force sensitive, allowing them to see using the Force. Jerrick's start is quite a bit different than one may expect as a Jedi. He wasn't simply a general in the Clone Wars that was betrayed suddenly, nor was he taken and tortured by the forces of the dark side. In actuality, the humble apprentice of the Jedi librarian Jocasta knew. Jerrick was found by her while she was going on an archaeological dig, and decided to bring the boy back to the Jedi Temple because of his great amount of potential. He was brought up in the temple and served Jocasta in the archives before becoming a Jedi archaeologist himself. Master Jocasta encouraged her pupil towards intellectual pursuits and to continually quest for greater knowledge and enlightenment. This lesson embedded itself into the young Jerrick in ways that she could never have predicted though, as the young Jedi developed a voracious appetite for answers to all possible questions. In the days of his early learning, Jerrick's studies did not end at the library like many other Jedi consulars did. Jerrick dedicated himself to learning the physical disciplines of the Jedi way, becoming a master practitioner of the elegant Form 2 lightsaber combat, eventually reaching the rank of Jedi Master. Jerrick would successfully train a Padawan to knighthood during the Clone War, a time of war, something that was considered exceptionally difficult. But this was mired in a bit of controversy. He spent most of his time at the Jedi Temple continuing his intellectual pursuits, and it would soon be here where he would learn the name of a strange nexus of power, a location that the text called the Valley of the Jedi. Jerrick searched the archives for more knowledge on this, but only found vague mentions of it coming in scraps of information. But his obsession would grow, going beyond the intellectual and becoming deeply personal. It wouldn't be very long at all before this thirst for power led him in direct conflict with the Jedi. Despite the rank of Master and his prominence as one of the Jedi Order's foremost scholars, Jerrick was not content among the Jedi Order. Jerrick was beginning to feel that he had exhausted all of the Order, all of the knowledge that they had to offer him, and he was now growing restless. Jerrick sought to accumulate greater knowledge, because for Jerrick, knowledge had become power. Soon the Jedi would undertake an expedition deep into the unknown regions, under the guise of finding and locating lost Jedi artifacts. But Jerrick's objectives had ulterior motives. He wanted to find out more about the Valley of the Jedi, but in this first pursuit, he failed. He would remain in the unknown regions though for the remainder of the Clone Wars, contemplating abandoning the Jedi altogether, and he would even remain in the unknown regions through the execution of Order 66. Upon his return to Coruscant thereafter, Jerrick immediately sensed that the Jedi had been utterly destroyed and that a new empire had risen in its place. Terrified for his life and his research, Jerrick fled back deep into the unknown regions, but this time he was pursued by an Inquisitor. Eventually, the scholar was cornered and captured by this Inquisitor, but instead of being executed, the Inquisitor sensed the deep hunger for knowledge and power within Jerrick, and he offered him a choice: join the dark side, obtain the knowledge that he sought, and serve the Emperor, or die. Apparently, Jerrick did not require very much convincing whatsoever, as he believed that he had already tapped all the resources of the light side of the Force, and required something greater. He readily accepted the dark side with a warm embrace and became a member of the Imperial Inquisition. Jerrick was dazzlingly intelligent, exceptionally cunning, and because of this, he became the sort of special forces unit for the Imperial Inquisition, a one-man army. He used these skills to hunt down Jedi who were on no-contact missions during the Clone Wars in various parts of the galaxy that were lesser explored. He was aware of the movements of the Jedi Shadows, in fact, the group of Jedi that Palpatine considered to be the most dangerous, and he knew where other Jedi scholars like he had been would hide. But rather than murdering these Jedi, Jerrick found and converted them, building his own secret army of dark Jedi within the Empire that were more loyal to him than even Palpatine. Years would pass, and the number of Jedi survivors would begin to thin and dwindle. And with the Inquisitors, the Emperor's hands, Shadow Guards, Purge Troopers, and of course Lord Vader, there wasn't much to go around, and Jerrick was being sent into the field less and less. But in fact, Sidious had taken a certain interest in Jerrick due to his background in Jedi research. So Jerrick was appointed to the status of the High Inquisitor and given a place within the higher Imperial Court, a massive honor, especially for a former Jedi. This would place Jerrick right beneath Palpatine in terms of power within the Empire. His new position was much like he was in the First Jedi, to be a researcher of knowledge and artifacts, but this time to serve the Sith. Once again, he became the foremost scholar in his field, an expert in Sith lore. But the more he studied of their history, the more he realized that he was not a Sith. He had become obsessed. He was now simply a dark Jedi, but he desired for something greater. He learned how to read Sith texts, to write and speak into the Sith tongue, which was knowledge usually only reserved for actual beings training for legitimate Sith lords. Jerrick would even go as far as adding Sith tattoos to his own face, which took the form of thin black lines flowing from the corners of his mouth. He became so adept in this field of study that Sidious went so far as to allow him to actually read his own work in progress, the Dark Side Compendium, a massive honor. What's fascinating is, as far as the lore indicates, Jerrick may have been one of the only people to have ever laid eyes on Sidious's writing while Palpatine was still alive. And of course, it goes without saying that he was well aware of the Emperor's identity as a Sith Lord and his rule of two relationship with Lord Vader. But Sidious was so candid with Jerrick that it has been said that Vader did not fill the position of the Dark Lord's apprentice, that place would have undoubtedly fallen to Jerrick. And if Vader were ever killed, Jerrick was the next in line. Because of this though, Jerrick grew to absolutely despise Lord Vader. He consistently attempted to curry favor with the Emperor, to supplant Vader in the trust, and become number 2 officially. In all honesty, Jerrick would have been the perfect apprentice for Sidious. He had everything that Darth Vader lacked, except for power. Jerrick had a pure understanding of Sith lore, a thirst for greater knowledge, and a desire to rule. He greedily lapped up all of the information regarding the Sith that he could find, and devoted himself fully to their ways. But Jerrick was never given the honor of that position, of becoming an official Sith, as Vader possessed the one thing that Jerrick did not: absolute, unquestioning power. Unfortunately for Jerrick, the only thing his efforts in learning the Sith way rewarded him with was the suspicious eye of the Emperor. The Emperor believed that he was perhaps growing too powerful too quickly, and took away much of his access to the Dark Side Compendium and higher Sith knowledge and lore. He could tell that Jerrick aspired to replace him on the throne of the Empire one day, and Palpatine would not suffer a rival. The Emperor then placed Grand Admiral Thrawn in charge of Jerrick's Star Destroyer, the Vengeance, so that he could keep a close eye on the Inquisitor. Jerrick was enraged at this development, but was wise in knowing that he needed to be patient to bide his time. He had been too ambitious and allowed himself to get noticed, so he needed to make a big play. He made plans to overthrow the Empire in its entirety, but made sure to keep his scheming on the down low. He was not so foolish as to believe that he could simply topple 2 Sith Lords alone, especially ones as strong as Vader and Palpatine. What he would need is true, undeniable power, and to this end, his mind was brought back to the pursuit of his youth, the Valley of the Jedi. He would get into contact with the prophets of the dark side on the world of Dromund Kaas, who currently worked for the Empire as well, and made an ally out of their leader, Lord Kronel. He then learned some valuable information about the Valley itself, that the Jedi had not known before within their own archives. The nexus point was in fact the aftermath of the Thought Bomb, which had been detonated over 1,000 years before on Ruusan. This had been the ritual that Bane had tricked Lord Khan into performing to absorb the life of a dozen Force-sensitive Sith Lords and 100 Jedi in the near vicinity into an orb of terrible energy. Since that fateful day, the cave in which the residue remained had collapsed into a powerful nexus point, becoming the Valley of the Jedi. Jerrick believed that in order to make this expedition and mutiny happen, he would need a great deal of support from within the Empire. He then began building a network of allies and benefactors that would support this plan. He already had Lord Kronel in his pocket, who became his new provider of dark side knowledge. He then began to collect several powerful agents to serve him personally, preparing to overthrow Sidious. It had been from Palpatine's dark side compendium that he had got the idea of gathering 7 Dark Jedi together to bind under his sole will. And so, he gathered them together in one location, which included the powerful slave and the fallen Jedi shadows, as well as a couple Sith-spawn mutants from Lord Kronel, and even Lord Kronel's very daughter. But Jerrick was a genius, and he knew that he would need more than the Force. He gathered financial backing from several private and corporate supporters that he made promises to. Among these secretly was Grand Moff Adrus Kane, and with all of this, Jerrick had been a billionaire at this time, and he used his vast wealth to establish bases and huge network of spies and informants. To the public, he had learned greatly from Palpatine, and so he kept his abilities in the Force a secret. He seldom used his abilities around his subordinates in order to maintain an air of mystery and terror. One of the most adept abilities was able to read the minds, as he was able to extract deep information from subjects against their will, whether that being from discerning the truth of a situation through the Force, or by literally ripping it out of their brain matter. Because of this, he often knew things like Imperial orders before the information was actually relayed to him. He simply read their minds. Because of this, his crew and followers began to be superstitious of him. Many of them swore that he could see everything despite not having eyes, and his fear and mystery only grew. But although he was amassing power from behind the scenes, he would still need to perform the duties of the Empire, and so he set his sights on a new target, the Rebel Alliance. He came to learn about a man named Morgan Katarn, who was a Force-sensitive rebel leader. Morgan had helped a rebel cell evacuate from the world of Ruusan previously, and while there, he had discovered the nexus of power within the Valley of the Jedi. He discovered that the spirits of the trapped Jedi were still there, desperately requiring a worthy Jedi to find and to free them. Along his journeys, he had met a Jedi Master by the name of Q Ron, whom he had shared the knowledge with. But since knowing that this was dangerous, Morgan was instructed by the Jedi to not reveal the location to the Rebel Alliance. The Jedi Master refused to possess the location himself, but according to his instructions, Morgan Katarn designed a complex map of Ruusan on the roof of his home, believing that nobody would notice that it ever existed. The Jedi, though, would entrust his lightsaber to his new friend, and Morgan put it in a holo recording of his son inside of their family droid. At this time, Kyle Katarn had become a stormtrooper, but Morgan held hope that one day his son would return and find the recording within the droid. He was eventually hunted down by Jerrick, though, who at the time was not aware of Morgan's discovery and had no idea the valuable knowledge that was right within his grasp. Jerrick believed that this man had just been another rebel leader, and so, after an unsuccessful interrogation, Jerrick beheaded Morgan Katarn. Jerrick would go on to try a few new schemes to gain power under the Emperor's nose. However, these ventures turned out to be unsuccessful, as it began to draw the attention of Sidious once more. Fearing that he could be killed if he made himself too much of a threat, Jerrick would decide to depart from his service as an Inquisitor. During his service, he had since become the governor of Sullust, and so he retired to the moon of Sullan, where he had constructed a dark side tower for himself. It was here that he laid low for the remainder of the Galactic Civil War quite wisely, once again waiting out another big war and biding his time for the correct moment, just like during the Clone Wars. And while Jerrick waited, he continued to gain allies and even purchased a Star Destroyer for himself, using the money from his own pocket, since his other ship had technically been Imperial property. Jerrick was preparing to swoop in and become the new Emperor of Palpatine's collapsing empire. But now let's talk about some of Jerrick's rarer abilities, as it was around this era where he was reaching the peak of his power, right before his big debut. By this point in his life, Jerrick had gained so much knowledge of the dark side that according to the Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2 game manual, his powers rivaled that of Darth Vader. Though we do have another source, the Galaxy of Fear series, which has another Force sensitive who actually met Vader, and he confirmed that Jerrick's power was close to the Sith Lords, but not quite on the same level. but regardless, comparable nonetheless, which is frankly insane. But even so much as approaching the level of Vader is a feat in and of itself worthy of acknowledgement, and apparently anyone who stood in Jerrick's presence was forced to acknowledge that fact as well. When Jerrick stepped into a room, the air grew noticeably colder. Tendrils of the dark side constantly exuded from him, poking and prodding at his environment like an antenna of an insect so that they could feel everything around them. In this way, Jerrick's perception was unprecedented. But this isn't where his power ended. He had great knowledge of both Jedi and Sith lore, giving him access to esoteric abilities. It got so intense that he could actually feed on the dark side from within other beings. Whenever someone experiences feelings of hatred or anger, he consumed it, and it made him stronger. He could also use Force Lightning and Terminus at will, and if he so chose, he was adept enough with telekinesis to use Force Barrier. Force Barrier was a complicated move that saw one project the Force around them in a solid wall, one that kept almost any attack from reaching them. As the High Inquisitor, he had grown very proficient in invading other beings' minds, but the extent of this is very impressive. He was able to read the minds of weak-willed from across the room, and to do so without them ever knowing it. And on many occasions, he forcefully extracted information from the minds of fully fledged Jedi Masters, those that were resisting him. And according to the Jedi Kuran, Jerrick could overshadow another's ability in the Force to the point of suppressing their powers. This is an extremely rare ability, only seen before by the likes of Darth Malak, Revan, and Sith Lords within Darth Vitiat's empire. So the fact that Jerrick was able to do this when separated from that version of the Sith is also impressive, and shows the breadth of his knowledge. Of the beings in the galaxy, it could be stated that the only one that knew more about the dark side than him at the time would be Sidious himself. But the power that Jerrick specialized in was a move known as Destruction. This was one that gathered as much dark side energies as possible within their very body, and then projected it outward in a focused blast. This was an upgraded version of the already devastating Force Blast technique. Jerrick's Force Destruction was so potent that it manifested as a physical orb of energy. Jerrick once totally obliterated a forest of living vines that were attempting to attack him, and on another occasion, his techniques were able to destroy a structure that was previously resistant enough to hold up a massive ship in place. But the odd thing about Jerrick's ability in Destruction was that he was also able to alter its effects. It wasn't just an explosion of raw, unrestrained energy and power. Before using it, Jerrick perfected the technique of freezing his enemy in place. What's astounding about this also is he didn't really have to charge this ability. He could use it anytime he needed to, nor did it appear to cause him any visible strain. All of these feats in the Force quickly put Jerrick on equal footing with many extremely powerful fully fledged Sith Lords in history, making him easily the most dangerous of Palpatine's subordinates besides Vader. And the margin between Jerrick and the person under him was wide. Soon, Jerrick's patience would pay off, as he had heard word of the Battle of Endor and the death of both Palpatine and Vader. Jerrick was elated. His two biggest threats were gone, and he hadn't had to lift a finger. Jerrick came out of hiding in the year 5 ABY with all of his resources and army, allowing him to officially undertake his journey to the Valley of the Jedi. Jerrick decided that he would create a glorious empire of his own, not one that would copy Sidious's, but one that would be greater. And with the Force Nexus within the valley, this was becoming a real possibility. According to legend, if he had gotten a hold of that power, then nothing would have been able to stop him. It would have been impossible to defeat Jerrick. It was said by Master Kuran that if Jerrick had absorbed the Pali of the Valley of the Jedi, he could rip a planet from its orbit, destroy a star system with a whisper, or eradicate all life within a solar system with a snap of his fingers. Keep in mind, this is where the energies of the Thought Bomb had been ruminating for 1,000 years. We aren't currently sure of the legitimacy of these godlike claims though, simply absorbing one Force Nexus created by the Thought Bomb. Even the strongest of Sith artifacts and Force Nexuses do not promise this level of power. So with the archives, we believe that this assumption of power is hyperbole, and that the Jedi Master gave to demonstrate just how terrible Jerrick's empire could be, if not his own individual power. Besides, if any of this were true, then Sidious would have stopped at nothing to attain the power of the Valley of the Jedi. But back to our story, Jerrick would eventually locate the Jedi Master Kuran and would interrogate him. He ended up finding out that while Ron did not know where the valley was, Morgan Katarn had. And Ron did know where Morgan had hidden the map to Ruusan. With that knowledge, Jerrick executed Kuran and went out to get the map. Meanwhile, Kyle Katarn had discovered both the lightsaber and the recording of his father within his family's droid. He then set off to both stop the machinations of the Inquisitor Jerrick and to free the trapped spirits of the Jedi. His and Jerrick's paths would cross on multiple occasions over the course of their journey, until their final duel on Ruusan. Unfortunately, Jerrick made it there first, and at long last he beheld the power that he had searched for his entire life. From the moment that he had been a Padawan, all through his service as an Inquisitor, he had searched for this one place of power, and now it was finally within his grasp. Walking into the central dome which was covering the wall of energy, Jerrick basked in its glow. Using the Force, he opened the dome and leaped inside to the heart of the valley's energy and power. He hovered cross-legged and meditated among the captive spirits of the Jedi and Sith of ages long past, bending them to his will, leeching their strength. He reveled in the Force energies of the valley until he reached a state of pure omniscience. At long last, total knowledge, something that he had coveted for years, was now his, and untold power now came with it. Kyle Katarn arrived just in time to find his enemy fully unchained, free from limits. Jerrick practically laughed at Kyle now, no longer threatened by the would-be Force wielder. But what Jerrick did not know was that Kyle had learned a piece of knowledge from the ancient Jedi, the power of Force light. This was perhaps the strongest of all of the ancient Jedi's abilities, one that had defeated the legendary Sith Lord Exar Kun, one that Jerrick did not know about. Using the light, Katarn surrounded Jerrick in a shell of light side power, shielding him from the dark side completely, which in turn blinded his ability to touch the Force momentarily. This would sever him from the power of the Nexus, taking away his long sought after knowledge and power. Totally defeated, Jerrick fell to the ground and provoked Katarn to kill him there. All that he had left was to goad the already teetering young Jedi to the dark side, getting him to kill him, to destroy the man that murdered his father. Instead though, Kyle showed mercy, honor, tossing the Inquisitor his lightsaber, and commanding him to duel. In this moment of desperate fury, Jerrick had forgone his carefully cultivated skills, and bum-rushed Katarn with his weapon. This left him open for a single, deadly blow from Kyle's blade, as the Inquisitor Jerrick fell to the ground and vanished in a flash of light, gone forever. In the aftermath, Kyle Katarn would free the spirits of the Jedi and Sith that had been trapped there for millennium, allowing them to finally achieve peace. But that was the story of Jerrick, the man who could have brought the galaxy to its knees had he achieved his goals. He's been quite a fan favorite of many within Legends for some time, and for good reason. Jerrick is perhaps the best candidate for Sidious's true apprentice, even threatening Vader in that position. Unlike so many others though, he was truly cunning and incredibly intelligent. He did not let his ambitions get the better of him, and he was dangerously patient. Jerrick was different from the others in the Empire because he knew how to play the game of Sidious. He knew that becoming too good at something painted a target on your back, and so he fought hard to lay low, to withdraw from the Empire, especially when Sidious began believing that he was a true threat. All in all, Jerrick did nearly everything right except for one thing. Ironically, his biggest problem as a Darksider was that he showed too much mercy. Time and time again, he attempted to lure Kyle Katarn to the dark side rather than murdering him when he had the chance. Jerrick saw him as a potentially powerful apprentice, and he wanted Kyle to be a part of his Dark Jedi army. This mistake cost him everything. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of the High Inquisitor Jerrick? Do you think he should have gotten more spotlight in other stories? And if Kyle Katarn somehow makes it to canon, would you like to see Jerrick make the jump with him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for joining us today in the archives. Your support and shared love of the lore is what keeps us going. And until next time, may the Force be with you, and have a phenomenal day.